not only did the change from Power of the Force 2 to Power of the Jedi give us a lot of new classic trilogy figures, because of that Lucasfilm edict that 50% of them had to be from the classic trilogy, but it also gave us a lot of great vehicles and some very cool packaging that really showed these vehicles off. So much for plastic-free packaging these days. Well, one of the biggest vehicles that was released during this era was the B-Wing, and if you're keeping track at home, and even though there's no English language in the Star Wars universe, you could still, I guess, call them X, Y, B, and A-Wings. The B-Wings are these guys, the ones that look like giant flying crosses or daggers. I think there's a technical reason why they're B-Wings. I think they're called Blade Wings, I think that's why, because, there's no B in the English, in the arborish language. So I'm not a vehicle collector, which is why my current toy room lacks a sail barge. I also just don't have room for it, even though it's really cool. But I will say the B-Wing is one of my favorite Star Wars ships because it symbolized Return of the Jedi and it was very cool looking. And the reason I included it in this series is because this version of the B-Wing came with a pack-in figure. And, well, I consider the B-Wing this figure's accessory because I collect figures, not vehicles. So it was one of the bigger accessories I had to buy, well, multiple times because we got vehicles throughout. We got lots of vehicles with figures, sometimes packed without, like in the vintage line, the B-Wing didn't come with the pilot. You could buy the fighter and the pilot sold separately, as you could with that Kmart set I just showed. But sometimes the vehicles and the figures were packed together, hence making the vehicle an accessory. And, well, it was a darn cool accessory because it was huge, It was a flying spaceship. What an accessory this was to a basic figure. Just had a big package, right? All right. Well, this was one of those figures that, as my buddy Adam Paula says, is just different enough to make you mad because it wasn't an exact re-release and it wasn't that different from a previous release. So let's get one thing out of the way. This is a Celestian pilot. Celestians are these guys. You probably know Nine Numb, the co-pilot of the Millennium Falcon. And, well, while Celeste is name-dropped in Return of the Jedi, go try to find it. It's in there. Vader says it. Well, there's a lot of confusion over which Celestian is which. So Nine Numb, again, is the guy in the vest hanging out with Lando. Ten Numb is this guy from the Rebel briefing room on Home 1, the Mon Calamari cruiser. Hence, no vest. He's in a B-Wing flying outfit there. You can see with the tubes and the pilot control thing over his chest, not a vest. People confuse him with Nine Numb because he's in red, but this is Ten Numb. Ten Numb has been shown in lots of the behind-the-scenes footage wearing a white flight suit, but never actually in the movie. It just comes from behind-the-scene footage, which shows up in things like the Chronicles book, and, well, if you just go online and type in Ten Numb, you'll find these images. What added to a lot of confusion was when a figure of Ten Numb in the correct red suit was released and called Nine Numb. This is not Nine Numb. This is Ten Numb. Do you have an older brother named 11 Numb? I don't know. So, yes, both of these figures, red suit or white suit, are both 10 Numb. Neither of them are 9 Numb, unless he did some weird behind-the-scenes quick change. So, while we've gotten many Celestian pilots over the years, the only one that is 9 Numb is that guy with the vest on the second from the left. All right, so 10 Numb in his behind-the-scenes footage, white outfit was first released as part of the Rebel Pilots 3-pack cinema scene in Power of the Force 2. One of the cooler of the cinema scenes, and I love me some Rebel Pilots. So this figure had a re-release as the pilot that came with a B-Wing. And see, it says includes Celestian pilot, unnamed Celestian pilot. So maybe it's not even Ten Numb. Maybe it's, some other Celestian. I don't know. The point is he's slightly different redeco, especially in the face is really where the change is. I guess it's really just a wash difference. Maybe I would have passed on this one if it was released these days, if I didn't see it as different enough. But it did come with a B-Wing, and I never had a B-Wing as a kid because, well, I just never did. It's a very cool ship. I had a Y-Wing, I had an X-Wing, never had an A-Wing either. I never had a TIE fighter. So, yeah, I guess my space battles were basically just X-Wings flying around. I don't think I had too many Imperial ships. But, hey, a B-Wing is a B-Wing. All right, and next up, we're going to talk about TIE fighters. And the reason we're going to talk about TIE fighters is, well, that's because the next figure that was released in chronological order was a pack-in with a TIE fighter. Now, there's 3 types of TIE fighters. Actually, no, there's 4 types of TIE fighters. Well, more if you go with Expanded Universe. Plus, there's those tank ones in the Dark Horse comics. So you have your basic TIE fighter from the vintage line, later re-released as the Imperial TIE fighter. The TIE Interceptor from Return of the Jedi, also in the vintage line. That's the one with the spiky wings. And then Vader's prototype TIE Advance, the one that he chases Luke with in the famous Yavin trench run. I have you now. The TIE Bomber, The fourth type of TIE fighter seen in the classic trilogy was never released by Kenner except as a small die-cast ship. We never got a 3 3/4 action figure collection version of this. So it was one of those TIE fighters that people wanted for a long time because they never had. Power of the Force 2 did give us the original, traditional TIE fighter, reverting to its original name of TIE fighter without the Imperial in there. This was the same mold, thanks to Pallet Toys, excuse me, as I bumble over the Save the Molds. And Darth Vader's TIE Fighter, or TIE Advance, as it should be called, was released as a brand new tool. We got a TIE Fighter pilot in Power of the Force 2, with a giant oversized rifle, because all the figures back then came with giant oversized rifle, because that's what kids like. It's a kids line, like all toy lines sold at retail. And in Power of the Jedi, we got our TIE Interceptor. And much like the B-Wing, it came with a pack-in figure with a giant TIE Fighter accessory. The TIE Bomber then was re-released with the same TIE Fighter pilot. So the same pack-in figure released with two different TIE Fighters in Power of the Jedi. So the only difference is bending knees. Otherwise, it's the same figure that we got in Power of the Force 2, but bending knees are important because that's what lets him sit in the cockpit. And if you'd never had a TIE Interceptor as a kid, like I didn't have any TIE Fighters, it was a cool way to get one. Now, of course, we would continue to get TIE Fighter pilots throughout the course of the line because it's a mainstay, and there's a lot of variants, especially when it comes to the helmet deco. Sometimes they have one Imperial symbol, sometimes two. One of them has like a little pie chunk taken out of it. It's like a specific TIE Fighter pilot. Others have that stripe on the top. So there's lots of different various ways to release TIE Fighter pilots, and we've gotten lots of various ways to get single-carded TIE Fighter pilots. And as I said, I collect every classic trilogy figure, so whether or not it comes with a blaster and on a single card, or it comes with a giant oversized accessory like his own TIE Interceptor, well, that was a basic figure to me. They're all basic figures. Some just come with vehicles as their accessory instead of a blaster. Although this one came with a blaster too. The Interceptor was released first, then the Bomber, to stay true to the keeping chronological order of release dates point of this entire series. And if you wanted both, you could get both. I only picked up the Interceptor because the TIE Bomber had the exact same figure, which I already had, so I didn't need a Bomber. As I said, I don't collect the vehicles, I just collect the figures. I only get the vehicles kind of when I have to. But I kind of regret it because the Bomber was really cool. And it's the only, well, actually, no, it's not the only time it was released. We got it again several years later. So this one had bendy knees. We would later get ones with all sorts of added articulation, like bendy elbows and twist wrist, etc., etc. But hey, we finally had a bendy knee one, and that was different enough.